All right. Hello to all of our viewers. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Liz Eggleston, and I work for Course Report, which is a resource for finding the coding bootcamp that's right for you. So if you haven't looked at Course Report yet, you can use our directory to find schools that fit all of your needs, and you should also check out our blog for unique features like interviews with students and instructors and founders at all of these bootcamps, so you can make a really good decision. So we are big fans of Metis. As you probably know, Kaplan has partnered with Thoughtbot for their UX design and front-end development course. And tonight we are joined by Allison House and Tyson Gatch, who created and are both now co-instructing the UX design course. So Tyson works with Thoughtbot, and House has experience with a few different companies as well as with freelancing. So we pretty much have the whole spectrum covered. And I want to remind everyone that this is going to be a question and answer style webinar, so please use the questions tab to send in any questions that you have or tweet at Course Report. And of course I have a bunch of questions as well. And one other reminder is that we have a pretty sweet discount for all of you who are tuning in to the webinar. So if you use the code Course Report in the referral section of the application, you'll get $500 off tuition. So I'm also happy to answer any questions that you have about discounts and scholarships after the webinar. But we will get into this. So Tyson and House, welcome. Please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your backgrounds.
Go ahead, House.
Sure. Well, let's see. So I'm a designer. I've been freelancing probably for about the last year or so. But prior to that, I was a product designer at Dropbox. I joined in 2012 when the team was sort of just getting started. I was the fourth designer to join. So I worked on a few things there, Dropbox for Business, growth, and onboarding, and also kind of got to help see a world-class team grow from scratch, which was really cool. Before that, I was the lead designer and the first designer at two really exceptional tech education companies. One of them is Codecademy, and the other one is Treehouse.
Very cool. So you have experience in the education world as well, so this is a very natural progression. I love that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, Tyson?
Yeah, my name is Tyson Gatch. I'm a designer at Thoughtbot here in New York City. I've been with Thoughtbot for about 8 months. Prior to that, I was freelance for over 3 years, building everything from web applications to marketing websites, and a handful of iOS apps towards the end there, which were really exciting.
Awesome. So we want to talk a little bit first about product design and what it really is and what it encompasses. So can you all tell us the difference between a UX designer, a product designer, a front-end developer, all of these sort of terms and roles? What are the differences? What are the similarities? And, you know, kind of go through that for us.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, House.
Yeah. So I think that product designer, the way that we see it, the kind of designer we're trying to build in this course, there's probably 3 areas that we want them to spike on. So a product designer is somebody who is good at interaction design, visual design, and knows a little bit of front-end development, which means that they can actually execute their ideas. So we see a couple other roles in this space like UX designer, interaction designer, web designer, and sometimes the meaning of those tends to depend on the company that's actually advertising for them. Mm-hmm. But in this course, the UX and front-end development course, we're trying to produce people who already are bring in people who have a little visual design skill already, give them the technical skill on top of that, the interaction design skill, and pretty much make people who can do anything.
What is interaction design? I think visual design I get, front-end development I get. What does interaction design sort of entail?
Yeah, I mean, I think interaction design is literally the interaction of users using your application that you're designing. And it's extremely important because that interaction has to be easy and there should be no barriers for a user to use your application. And so the interaction is extremely important.
So you mentioned front-end development. What are like the technical skills that you need in order to be a UX or a product designer?
So I would say at the very least you should have some basic front-end skills. So that would be HTML, CSS, and like light JavaScript. HTML and CSS are sort of the building blocks of the web. Everything starts with HTML and CSS. So I think fundamentally you have to understand those two things in order to get started with prototyping.
Are there people who have like back-end development backgrounds who now do UX design? Like, does that help at all, or is it too much? Like, do you kind of stop at front end?
I think it can help. I think that there's
Yeah.
some overlap there. I think Tyson actually probably experiences that quite a bit at ThoughtBot.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of people come actually from the back-end world and move into the front end. The back-end engineers are still very much so familiar with the front end. That's what they're interacting with at the end of the day as well. So whereas they might not be using CSS every single day like a typical product designer might be, they're definitely familiar with the HTML and have a good solid understanding of at least what CSS is and where it comes into play and the powerfulness of it.
Okay, cool. So I'm assuming that since you both have been successful in these careers, that you have all of these skills. How did you sort of pick these things up along the way? Did you like freelance to learn them? Did you do online classes? Did you do it in your undergrad, or what was your sort of path?
Yeah, go ahead, House. Sorry.
Sure. Well, for me, I think I started when I was pretty young. I was first introduced to building websites in a class that I was taking in school when I was 11. And so I got the bug, but I didn't really pursue it until a few years later, where I realized that you could view source on a website. You could actually see the code for a website, and you could sort of reverse engineer it and build your own. You could use that as a starting point for your own code. So throughout high school, I was sort of trying to hack together websites, self-teaching, and I found within myself a real passion for it. I just felt, you get this surge, like, oh my gosh, I'm a hacker when you build a website, even though it's something so simple. So I kind of, I think I've been chasing down that feeling for a while.
Yeah, I started somewhat young as well, dabbling in Microsoft Front Page in middle school, which was fun. And then definitely had the GeoCities bug for a little while. I think it was really like college was kind of my point where I studied recording arts and music business, and in music business we had one little class that was about web design, mostly talking about how to utilize web design to market music. And the class was pretty lightweight, but I found myself chatting every single night with my older brother, who was also doing web design at the time, and would teach me all sorts of little nuggets of information, and I just kind of fell in love with it from there. I actually worked in the music industry for a couple years after that, post-college, but was still moonlighting websites for friends and such, and then found myself doing it for small businesses, so decided to go freelance after that. And the freelancing for me was, and having further mentors was the huge learning curve for me that really allowed me to kind of take it all in, soak it in, and go from there.
Absolutely. So what are some of the types of jobs that you can get with a background in product design, UX design? And since you both have such great backgrounds, I'd love for you to sort of go into what it means to work for a company versus a company like ThoughtBot, a consultancy, or to be a freelancer. Like, what is that sort of? What do your day-to-days look like, and how do they sort of differ with those different paths?
Yeah, I think my experience is primarily in startups. I did spend a little bit of time at a consultancy, but for the most part, I've been pretty startup-y. And I would say that my experience at Treehouse and Codecademy were relatively similar. On a day-to-day basis, I was sort of wearing many hats, as they say. Sometimes I was actually getting into code, working, such a small team at the time, so I would work directly with the founders, get into the code base with them, and we were pushing and pulling code. We were sort of interacting in that way. And Dropbox is a little bit different. I think that the design process there was just a little bit different, where I was less likely to actually dive into code. More likely I was able to just prototype my ideas at a high level, or even just show mock-ups or sketches of what I wanted to do and work with people from there.
Yeah, so I freelanced, as I mentioned, for quite a while before this. That was a really wonderful experience. I think, kind of like I mentioned, for me it was a huge learning experience, which was super powerful. I love the flexibility of freelancing and be able to kind of take a little bit of time off between projects and learn something new and continue to learn during projects. I think I learned a whole lot about dealing with people and keeping communication strong, And I liked being able to very directly and just by myself, to approach companies and talk with them about their needs and what they want. When Thoughtbot found me and I started working here, I really wanted to keep that flexibility, and I'm really thankful that Thoughtbot kind of continues that. Thoughtbot is a place where you can kind of make your job what you want it to be. It's very open. The culture here is just wonderful. But we work in client services, so we have clients coming to us all the time, and usually, most commonly at least, you are typically on one project at a time, sometimes a little bit project here, and we maintain our investment days on Fridays, which allow us to work on open source and kind of invest in ourselves and the community and stuff, so that's really powerful too. So while we are an agency, I think the culture here is specifically really nice and very open to allow for freedom as a designer.
Yeah, Thoughtbot definitely has that reputation, and you mentioned open investment days, and I know that's something that's sort of carried into Metis, and so I want to talk about it in a few minutes, but thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Can y'all give us sort of a sense of the job market for the field, and have you both been in New York for most of your careers?
Well, I'm actually from San Francisco, so
Okay.
I kind of feel like what I see out there, I actually just moved to New York just to teach this course. But, a lot of my friends are working in startups or also starting their new companies. I know a lot of designer founders. And the vibe seems to be that there's a huge talent shortage, that everybody needs good designers and developers, that there aren't enough people coming out of school or whatever other sort of education process with these skills. And it's not like there's one job that needs to be filled. I think that right now we see a lot of technology companies that are just hungry to get people on board and as many talented people as possible. There's really no limit to how many people they'll hire. It's fiercely competitive, and I think talent is sort of the make or break on that front.
Tyson, have you noticed the same thing in New York?
Yeah, I really have. I think we can echo here the same sort of shortage that you see. There's plenty of startups to go around here in New York as well, which I know, the Silicon Valley is kind of known for that, but I think we have plenty here as well. So there's definitely a lot of that going on, and I feel like I'm always just hearing people wanting to hire great designers, and even here at Thoughtbot, we're just always looking. Like, it's just a thing that it always exists. So we're really lucky in that way, actually, that there's definitely jobs to go around.
Very cool. So can we talked about sort of the technical skills that you need. What are some of the soft skills that I'm sure that you've worked with, tons of people in your roles. Like, what have sort of been like the soft skills that have stood out as as you worked with people who are like great UX or product designers?
For me, I think whether it's somebody who's more in a product manager role or in a product designer role, I think it's just great design thinking and the ability to think through a problem and solve a problem and sort of come up with unique solutions that really satisfy a user's need without getting too complicated. And then being able to express that idea, the communication of that and sort of the collaborative component is also another big one for me.
Do you find that you're communicating a lot with like non-technical people outside of your like design sort of team or role?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure for Tyson, he has to deal with clients, and then at Dropbox, there are several different verticals that we would have to kind of justify and communicate our ideas to.
Cool, Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it any better. She really kind of hit the nail on the head. Specifically when you're working in client services, also we have lots of clients who are not necessarily tech savvy, and so we have to kind of be open and really communicate very well about what we mean, and not just speak in all these crazy weird terms that they don't understand, and kind of carry that out through the project and make them feel comfortable with what you're doing.
Cool. Where does a product designer's job sort of come into play during like the development process? Like who are some of the people that you work with, on a team to get a project done, and when is it sort of the product designer or UX designer's time to like really shine? And put their stamp on the project?
I would say in a product designer's role, I mean, I think part of being a product designer is getting involved in the software development process from the very beginning.
Okay.
Like at Dropbox, our minimum team would be a project manager, a designer, and a developer, and those three people could carry forward a project all the way from inception to execution. But I think you could go with as lean as just a developer and a designer. We see a lot of these sort of pairings in early stage companies or founders as well.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot too. We kind of mimic that method and almost always have at least a developer and a designer kind of kicking off. We specifically utilize a design sprint typically at the beginning of a project if it's necessary, and that's where we will have a designer or developer, and then usually someone to lead the design sprint, as well as all the stakeholders from the client side in one room and really getting that thing kicked off super well from the beginning, just to set the stage for that product that you're about to build. And throughout the building, the developers and the designers work very tightly together throughout the entire thing. I think there's a lot of interaction, a lot of micro interaction that needs to take place throughout that product lifeline that is just necessary.
Absolutely. So speaking of that sort of product lifeline, Tyson, we thought it would be cool if Tyson took us through an actual project that he had worked on. And so he is going to share with us a pretty neat project and how it sort of came to fruition.
Yeah, so I'm going to share my screen here. Get that going. How's that? Working? Perfect. Sweet. So this was a fun little project we had here at ThoughtBot. This was actually my very first project I worked on. They were a wonderful client. They're Schoolkeep, and they're out of New York City. They were a startup. They came to us needing their product to be built from the ground up, and we helped them accomplish that goal. I wanted to specifically kind of talk about one piece here that we kind of came across while we were about midway through the project. We do a lot of usability testing. We try to do as much testing as we see fit to make sure that we're kind of moving along in building the right thing as we're building it. So this was what you can do is you can build a website for a school. So you can run classes and courses online, and you can manage it all in this nifty little backend that we built with them. So as a school, you probably have a need to customize it to kind of fit your brand. So you can upload a logo, and you can also kind of change the colors around your school website to fit the colors that you have with your brand. So really quickly from the beginning, we built a very simple way to accomplish that. It was simply these input boxes where you could put the hex codes in and kind of click save and then go preview that and check it out. And it was enough to get by. You know, it was extremely simple. It was really quick to build. This is our MVP, our minimum viable product. But when we put this in front of people, real people who would use this product, we saw people get hung up in this specific area when we would ask them to maybe customize a color or something. I think to non-designers or non-developers, you know, this hex code thing is a little scary maybe. They didn't quite know what they were doing. And I think it's hard here to understand what you're changing on the actual website. There's no quick way to understand that. So we kind of set out to tweak that and make it better for the people. So this was a sort of the first iteration that we had. We decided pretty quickly that we wanted to introduce these sort of pre-built color palettes so that really quickly with one click you could get a different color scheme on your website and kind of set yourself apart from the others. We also really wanted to introduce some sort of preview into the backend interface so that you can kind of see like what you're changing. So this specifically here, we introduced some of the key elements on the website, and you can select colors and change those. The next iteration, we wanted to further refine the pre-built palettes and kind of offer what those would look like, sort of showcase which one is actually selected right now much better. We also wanted to make the preview look a little bit closer to the actual front end of the school website. So we actually introduced the background and the sort of center white area in the middle, which mimics what the school websites would look like. And then finally, we kind of moved on to the next iteration and further refined the actual selection of individual element colors. So you could click an element or some text in the preview, and it would bring up this lovely little color picker so that you can now visually select colors rather than worrying about these weird hex codes, which some people get caught up on. And so that was super powerful, and we were finally able to put this back in front of users, and we saw a nice little gain in the usability here that helped people customize their websites. So that was just like a really small example of one piece of a product that we were building that we, kind of took a problem that we had, an issue that we found in actual user testing, came back to the drawing board, worked closely with designers and developers to really flesh out a solution and offer even some new features in that, and ship a product all within a fairly quick time frame. This is an iterative process. I'm sure now even the live real version of SchoolKeep as it is now is probably even better and different, and they've even found more ways to improve upon this. So that's a really cool thing.
Tyson, how long did this process take?
I'm going to go back to my video here really quick.
Oh, okay.
There we go. I think this took about a week of time. Probably, the week before we may have done the usability testing, and then kind of figured that out with the stakeholders of the client to really get that into the backlog and figure out the priority for that. This maybe had sunk down a little bit, maybe not so high on the priority list as other things.
Okay.
And then we'll jump that into the current work and get it done.
Okay, this might sound super crazy, but can you tell us what usability testing is and like how it sort of manifests itself? Are you like having people come into the office and use the product? Or are you like putting it on a website for people to like kind of crowdsource, or how do you?
Yeah. I mean, really, it could be both things. There's definitely websites that exist out there that you can quickly upload work, and they'll kind of magically get it out to some people to test. That exists and works as far as I've heard. Mm-hmm. This particular case, we actually in what we do somewhat commonly here at Thoughtbot is we'll just put up quick ads on Craigslist, and it's surprising. You'll actually get a lot of people come in from all walks of life. We sort of have a form that we tweak each time to kind of fit a certain type of person that we're looking for, and kind of take those in. But we'll usually get 3 to 5 people to come in for about a 30 to 45 minute session and sit them down in a room. The goal here is to get your product in front of possible users of the product as quickly as possible during the creation of your product. You want to test that with people, and you learn a lot. You really do. They'll be very candid, and they'll tell you everything about their frustrations and the things that go well too, and that gives you a lot of insight on kind of where to work within your product. What should you work on next? What's really high priority? What can maybe wait? To them, the button color might not matter as much to you as a designer, but to them, they just want to accomplish their goal. Those really come out in usability testing.
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. It sort of like adds a very human element into building a very technical thing. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really easy when you're building a product to get caught up in the technical stuff and to make your code beautiful and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we're building products for people, like real people, and you need to take that to mind throughout the entire course of making that product.
Yep. Wonderful. Thanks for taking us through that project. It's a really sort of like neat progression from different iterations of the same product. Cool. So y'all have sort of told us about your background and your path to becoming product designers, and I'd love to talk about Metis a little bit. So how do you see Metis sort of fitting in? Why do you see a need for something like Metis, and how does it sort of meet that need?
I mean, having worked at companies like Codecademy or Treehouse, I obviously see the benefit of just learning some of those skills online. And I think those are exceptional resources, not just because I built them, but I think they're really incredible resources for just learning some technical skills. But I think it's a lot harder to teach design thinking, and a big part of that is getting feedback and critique on the work that you produce, which is hard to get. It's hard to automate that in those sort of like services like Codecademy or Treehouse. So sort of the benefit here is, one, you get a ton of context. Like as we take you through the software development process, you understand the role of design within that process and how you would collaborate with developers or other stakeholders as you go through it. So the entire time we give you tons and tons of context. And then we also give you a lot of critique, a lot of feedback. And to me, I think with self-taught designers, and I would include myself in this, it's very easy to not realize the value of feedback and critique early on. When I was working at Codecademy or Treehouse, I was the solo designer there. But I realized I had sort of hit my ceiling as far as how well I could design. And I didn't think I could actually move beyond that point until I worked with other designers, which was part of my motivation for joining Dropbox. And then there was a ton of critique, a ton of feedback, and that was the point where my skill set exploded. I didn't even realize how much I was sort of stagnating at that point. So I think that's another part of the huge value of coming into an in-person class like this, is that we're able to work with you one-on-one, give you specific advice for your professional goals, and also give you direct feedback on what you're producing.
To your knowledge, like you describe yourself as a self-taught product designer. Is there like a way to not be self-taught? Like, can you learn this stuff in a university? Can you like major in something that sets you up to be a UX or a product designer?
I think it's difficult right now, and I think a big part of that is that it's the most important thing that you can do is solve problems to become a better problem solver. And when you go to school, there's sort of a finite number of projects that you can get in a semester. And to me, what is going to help you rapidly improve is prolificness, is producing a lot of work. And I think a lot of folks get interested in this stuff and dive into that hole, right? They start to make things, and they make a lot of things, and that's how they improve quickly. I think that that academic programs are often a little bit behind. It takes a while to get courses approved and then to go through that process. So they're not always up to speed with the industry.
That's fair. So with that being said, tell us sort of about the curriculum in the Metis course. Are you going to be breaking it into projects? Like, how are you going to make sure that people are getting that prolific amount of work, sort of on their resume?
Yeah, I think we've been taking a lot of time to make sure that people coming out of this course are going to have actual work to come and show prospective employers and have that and say, like, I built this, I did this, it's something I designed, it's something I built with my own hands. And I think that's super powerful. Every single week, almost, we're going to have small little exercises and a little bit bigger exercises at the end of each week. And then what I'm really excited about is the end we have two bigger projects. We have a team project where the designers within the course are going to get together into small teams, as well as bringing in the Ruby on Rails bootcamp and linking up with developers to
that's cool.
Stuff. And we're really looking forward to that. And then at the very end, they'll have a passion project, is what we call it. And that's going to be a project of your own. You'll be able to come up with your own idea. We're going to help people build that, just whatever idea that they have and come to mind, so that they have 2 full weeks to be able to build that. And at the end, they can really claim that they've built something on their own and taken something from idea and concept through the entire process of building a product with something to show at the end.
Cool. I love that you're working with the Ruby on Rails bootcamp as well. I think that's awesome.
Definitely.
So what kind of background should someone like realistically have before they apply to Metis?
As far as our requirements go, we don't have any coding skill that's required. We're basically looking for some fundamental graphic design skill. So as I mentioned earlier, we kind of have these 3 pillars that we're trying to build: somebody who's good at visual design, interaction design, and then also front-end development. So we kind of look for that visual layer to be founded so that we can start building on top of it.
What if somebody doesn't have that visual background. What are some like sort of resources that they can use to like learn, you know, typography or color theory or these things that y'all would like to have, you know, a qualified applicant have before they apply?
I never studied design. I studied recording arts, and it's something that you can learn on your own. I think for sure. I think it takes a little bit more time, maybe, and it's a little bit different mindset than necessarily learning coding. But there are principles out there in design, and there are foundations that are very common. And so those things are extremely powerful, and that's kind of what we're looking for coming in, as House mentioned, is those principles and foundations. So I think anyone can develop that sense of good visual design over time, for sure.
Okay. And then, Tyson, you had talked a little bit about the personal investment days at Thoughtbot. Can you tell us how those will sort of carry into Metis and what you're going to use your Fridays for?
Yeah, totally. That's super exciting for me, actually. And coming into Thoughtbot as a freelancer was something that I really looked forward to, because I feel like it lets people be a little bit free and kind of make with it what they want. It's going to allow students every single Friday to kind of take a break from the day-to-day lecture and stretch out, kind of catch up from the week a little bit. I think some weeks are going to be a struggle for some people, and other weeks are going to be a struggle for other people. There's going to be some flex there, and that's totally fine. So if on a Friday you need to step back and kind of review some things and do some things over, that's totally cool, and we want to kind of plan for that. If you breeze through the week and everything's wonderful and you get it all and down pat, then you can continue working on that, or you could help other people who might be struggling, or continue working on your own things and producing design products, which is awesome. So that day just allows us to kind of break the mold a little bit and let people be a little bit free to stretch their arms.
Really cool. And House, you and Tyson are the two instructors for this course, right?
Yep, that's us.
Yeah. Will there be any TAs or anything like that, or?
It's primarily going to be us, but we think we're going to occasionally bring in air support, as I've been calling it, from Thoughtbot, from other members of Thoughtbot, and possibly other members of the design community to give deep dives or sort of specialized discussions. So one example is we are hoping to bring somebody in to give a workshop on a program called Sketch. This is an illustrative program. It's you can build mock-ups in it. It's particularly good for building mock-ups for iOS design or app design. So there are going to be a couple occasions where we do deep dives and have other folks who really specialize in those areas come in and give you their expertise on that. But for the most part, you can expect me and Tyson.
Very cool. What are you expecting the cohort size to be for this first one?
I'd say 8 to 12 is probably what we're looking at.
Awesome. That sounds like a wonderful student-to-teacher ratio then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, I love hearing how you've sort of like designed the curriculum to, produce a really well-rounded UX and product designer. Have you designed the curriculum to get people to a point where they're like able to get real jobs as product designers? Like, how are you sort of incorporating the daunting task of like job placement into the 9-week curriculum?
Yeah, so we actually have a dedicated talent manager who helps us out with that, who at the end of the course, we also have a career day where companies local to New York will also come and speak to our students and learn more about them. Mm-hmm. But Lillian, our talent placement manager, will work with students one-on-one to help them build their Dribble portfolios, for example, Dribble being a popular site for finding designers to hire and also for showcasing your work. And she helps you set up your social media or your portfolio, your website. It really gets you prepared to present yourself to the world. Mm-hmm. And of course, Tyson and I also have quite a bit of experience ourselves. So we're setting aside some time at the very end of the course to do some Q&A and to help people figure out those next steps and sort of to provide our experience as a stepping stone.
That's awesome. Tyson, I know that Thoughtbot is involved in like the curriculum, but is there any chance that Thoughtbot is like hoping to hire someone from this class?
Yeah, we have this wonderful new New York office, and we are opening offices more and more, So we're always looking for wonderful, talented designers. So it's definitely a possibility for sure.
Very cool. When does the next METIS program start?
September 22nd. So it's coming up quick.
What's the application deadline?
Yeah. And so that means next Tuesday is going to be the application deadline. That'd be September 2nd, I believe.
Yeah.
Are you both working on like applications and admissions as well?
Yeah, we interview students directly.
You are?
Yep.
What's something that a student can do to make sure that they're standing out? I get that question a ton. How can I stand out from everyone else applying? What are you sort of like? What would jump off the page to you?
I think we're looking for compassionate people. No one wants to talk to just a boring person over Google Hangout about stuff. You should be excited about what you're doing. And you should be passionate about the work you're producing. It's okay if the work isn't your best work, or maybe you're scared to show it a little bit, and that's totally fine, but we just want people who are very open and love to talk about their work and are willing to grow about who they're going to become.
Yeah, I would say on top of that, there's two qualities that we kind of have. Maybe three qualities, and compassionate is one of them. The other two, so number 2 is curious. We love curious people. We like to see that spark of interest, and to sort of find that within somebody else. I think it's not just that being making somebody a good designer, but also a good student, somebody who's a joy to teach and worth teaching. The other one is articulation or communication. We need somebody who's able to talk through their design ideas and help us understand what they think and where they're coming from. And there's a sense of openness, as Tyson mentioned, that I think accompanies that. So if they can tell us what's on their mind, we can tell them what's on our mind. It makes critique, and I think the whole process of growth a lot easier for us.
Great. Well, to everyone who's watching, you just got the secret. So, is there anything else that y'all want to add about METIS or about UX or product design in general that we didn't touch on tonight?
I don't think so. I think you asked so many great questions. You covered so much.
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Thanks so much to everybody for joining Course Report for our webinar tonight. And thanks so much to Tyson and to House. We can't thank you enough for being here. If you have any additional questions for METIS after this webinar, I'll send out their contact info after this. And if you have any questions about Course Report, please, of course, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We will send out the recording of this webinar, so check your inboxes for that. And you can share it with any of your friends who might have missed it live. And please visit coursereport.com, sign up for our email list, and you'll get all of our future updates on webinars and interviews. And you can tweet us and tell us what topic or school you'd like to see at the next webinar that we have. So thanks so much for tuning in, and good night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Liz.